It's now time to bring you the part 2 of our interview segment, and we are focusing on the 2021 budget that has already been passed. This is worth 13.58 trillion naira, and it was earlier jacked up by about 505 billion naira. The passage followed the presentation of the Harmonized Appropriation Committee report of the two chambers by the Chairman, House Committee on Appropriation Ali Betara, and pegs daily crude oil production at 1.86 million barrels per day at $40 per barrel, and also an exchange rate of 379 naira to the dollar, and an inflation rate as well, inflation growth of 11.9%. In the breakdown, 496.52 billion naira is slated for statutory transfer, 3.32 trillion naira goes for debt service, while 5.64 trillion naira goes for recurrent expenditure, with 4.12 trillion naira for contribution to the Development Fund for capital expenditure. According to the Senate, the increase in the 2021 budget by 505 billion naira is necessitated by the need to upscale the National Social Investment Program with 365 billion naira and a discovered under projection of revenue to the tune of 100 billion naira. The passed appropriation bill is against the initial proposal of 13.08 trillion naira to a joint session of the National Assembly by President Muhammadu Buhari earlier on October the 8th this year. Now, earlier today, I had a chat with Professor of Accounting, now University of Nigeria, on the 2021 budget, and I started off our conversation with his take on the ratio of recurrent and capital expenditure for the 2021 budget, as this still replicates the same pattern we've seen over the years for some time. Now, some individuals say this cannot support a strong recovery.
Irrespective of which administration that is in power, the recurrent expenditure heavily outweighs every other thing in the budget. And it is almost 70%. And it is not good for a developing economy that you have to overweigh the budget with recurrent expenditure. And I want to tell Nigeria that the recurrent expenditure is simply the cost of governance. It's like a man who is receiving 10 million naira per annum and is spending 7 million naira on himself. How? And leaving 3 million naira for the entire family. Do you think that that family will survive? It's not possible. It is definitely not possible. The cost of governance is what is the recurrent expenditure, nothing more. So I cannot be working and I'll be receiving 10 million naira, and I will use 7 million naira on myself alone. Maybe I have a family of 10. Then I will leave only 3 million naira for the remaining members of the family, including my feeding. That's 10 members of the family. It's not possible. So that is what Nigeria is doing, and it has started from administration to administration, one administration to another. But the problem is that because they don't want, sometimes they don't want to tell also the actual recurrent expenditure. The recurrent expenditure, non-debt. You also add recurrent expenditure, debt. You also add recurrent expenditure, statutory transfer, because all this put together make up the recurrent expenditure, not just those ones that layman will see there. By the time you put all these things together, you see that recurrent expenditure is getting up to almost 70%, and it's too much. So we praise that it's no longer 20%. Now that capital expenditure is no longer 20%. That is now 20-something. What is the capital expenditure as at today? That capital expenditure is 27 or 28% of the budget. It's not possible to use 20-something or 28 or 29, even 29, even 30 to render services to the whole nation. Because it's only capital expenditure that touches on infrastructure. It's only capital expenditure that gives you electricity. It's a capital expenditure that gives you road, railway. It gives you also, it is through capital expenditure that you have security infrastructure. We are lacking everywhere. We don't have even ordinary CCTV. And we are consuming everything we have in the name of recurrent expenditure because many people don't know the meaning. So it's just too much for the economy. So I feel that government should look into the possibility of reducing the cost of governance. It is giving serious problem to the economy. Starting from public service, starting from political office holders, whether you are a legislator or you are a minister or you are whatever. Because those things you see there as their salary is not what they take. They will give you a salary of maybe 3-4 million per annum, or maybe even whatever. But in the end, it ranges up to 100 or 200 million per annum per person. By the time you compute what they say that National Assembly takes on the average of 27 to 30, you multiply it by 12, how much? For one single person. And it's by the number of all of them. You multiply by the number. It has taken the chunk of what the nation would have used in rendering services. So their salary, their remuneration is important. But it cannot go beyond the salary of other legislators across the globe. Because my salary, as I am now as a professor, does not go beyond the salary of other professors in Europe or in India or in any part of Asia. So we should be the same in every ramification, no matter what service you render. And who even tells you that the service they render is better than what some of us render? It's not better. It's just the way that somebody who should lead you decide to use your resources to refurbish himself and leave you dejected and rejected.
We also looked at reducing the extent of external shocks on the economy as one of the ways to consolidate in any recovery. Oil still remains the nation's major source of foreign exchange, and I had his take on key assumptions with regard to oil at a benchmark of $40 per barrel, with an estimate of 1.8 million barrels per day, as the second wave of the COVID-19 is causing fresh disruptions and also threatening demand.
Benchmark is fine, because if you consider it with the benchmark of last year, that is around 57, which is not realizable, not only because of COVID, but because of the fluctuating oil prices. You can commend them that the benchmark of 40 this year is fine. You can also see that the production, daily production by NNPC or whatever has actually dropped, because the one of last year was not realized. In a budget, if you set a budget and you see that the previous budget was not realized, the next thing is that the next budget you have to adjust to the reality. Actually, if there is no restiveness in Niger Delta, that 1.86 could be realized. I feel it can be realized. Then, if there is any distortion anywhere, that's a different ballgame. But the setting of that target is fine, because budget is just a quantitative plan of action of what you are going to do. It's not the actual. But what I always tell people that prepare budget is that if your budget variance goes beyond 10%, you have prepared a very bad budget. But in Nigeria, you can see variance of over almost 70% or almost 100%. And nobody talks, and nothing happens to those who prepare it. Next year, they will still be the one to do the next one. If you have an employee that doesn't give you what you want, you remove him and put another person who could give you what you want, because there must be an objective in whatever you do. Either is public sector or private sector, there is an objective, and the budget has an objective. If it's not achieved, it all means you have not rendered services to the society, and that is what public service is all about. The budget of this year is over-bloated, and is mostly over-bloated by borrowing. It is very, very wrong for a human being to set up a budget last year. You see you could not meet it, maybe because of the economic depression or because of COVID, and the economic depression is still there, the COVID is still there.
Well, the budget was also jacked up by an additional 500 billion naira. Now, the biggest concern is the fact that the Nigerian budget is largely funded by borrowing. With dwindling revenue base, I asked now if Nigeria has developed a sustainable repayment plan, and his thoughts on what the federal government should be doing in terms of looking towards the capital market to fund key infrastructure. Here's his thought.
You go ahead this year's budget and bloat it from 10 trillion of last year, 10.8 trillion of last year, you bloated it up to 13.5. What are we doing? Do we really have the finance people and the economists? Or are we saying that these people are lacking in this country? Because these are the people who are very much acquainted with the process of budget, who studied budget, who are very familiar with the budget and knows how much variance a budget can be allowed, and knows what a budget means. That a budget must have a target, a budget must have also a goal. If those things are not met for last year, then you come this year again and bloat the thing beyond this thing. And the worst of all is that 5 trillion is to be borrowed. And our capital expenses is 3 trillion. The meaning is that the government swallows the entire income of the nation and now went to borrow, even to borrow 5 trillion. So how can you tell a human being this and he believes that you are doing something for him? The meaning is that every income of the nation, which is around 8 trillion, they have eaten it up with recurrent expenses, and is not even sufficient for their current expenses. Then they have to go and borrow to be able to do capital expense. Is it possible? Can we continue in this way? So it's not okay. It's not only that you borrowed for capital expense, but you also borrow extra 2 million to fund your recurrent. And extra 2 trillion to fund your recurrent. And the additional 3 trillion to fund capital. Why can't we adjust our budget according to what we earn? Our huge debt eats up our this thing every year. Look at the debt servicing compared to the budget for this year. This debt servicing is the ones borrowed in the previous years. And we are borrowing again 5 trillion to add to those debts. By next year, the debt servicing will jumpstart higher. So I think we are just playing with the nation's funds. It's not good. But the shortcut to this is to simply reduce the cost of governance, because that does everything. You are crying for infrastructure. You are crying for this. And you are eating the whole money you have for infrastructure. How can a man cry that he doesn't have a house, he wants to build a house? and he receives money, he eats up the whole money he receives. How can you build a house if you don't save? That's the problem of Nigeria. It's not only this administration, even the previous ones. But I expect these people to learn from the mistake of the past.
And wrapping up the conversation, we looked at new and innovative tax collection measures as one sure way to fund key infrastructure as well as development agenda, and the expectation in terms of new directions he expects government will adopt come next year to spur growth.
The best way to spur growth through tax or through taxation is to adopt friendly tax regime. And the friendly tax regime will encourage investors to come in. You cannot grow with the government budget. You cannot. You can only grow if the government budget is used to provide enabling environment, to provide security, to provide electricity, to provide roads, railway, and all the things that will enable investors coming here and do their work without anybody harassing them, without anybody kidnapping them, or without anybody going to boggle their investment. And in terms of friendly tax regime, the taxation in Nigeria is very, very clumsy. I'm a tax consultant. I see the problem, both at the federal and at the state and even local government. So, people are afraid of Nigerian taxation system. I've been to different parts of the world. They will tell you that Nigeria has more than 7 layers of taxes. Between 7 to 10 layers of taxes that you don't even know the rate. You can only know the rate when they come to you and say, this is what you must pay here. Somebody may be trapped.
Well, that was my chat with Ofili Ugudioha, the Professor of Accounting at the Now University of Nigeria.